Today we're in Chapter 6, Section 2, and what we're going to be talking about is the effects of prices, meaning how do we look at prices to determine what we were willing to pay or what we're not willing to pay for a product, depending on what that product is. So to do this, I'm going to start off with a little bit of a game, sort of as a show to see what's going on. All right, I know that was cheesy, but oh well. So what I want you to do is, I'm going to ask you about a couple of different products, and I want you to pause the video or pause the lecture to think about what are the prices that you're willing to pay for a product, or do we have really any kind of comprehension of what prices or what we pay for something. So the first thing I'll give you is a gallon of milk. Take a second to write it down in your notes. The gallon of milk costs $3.16. How close were you? Next we have is a box of Cheerios. A box of Cheerios costs $3.64. These prices are all coming from Grove City, Pennsylvania. The next item we have is a Dyson vacuum cleaner. The cost of a new Dyson vacuum cleaner is right $279. The next item we have is a Keurig coffee maker. The price of that coffee maker is right now $59 for the single unit. Next, we have a Colgate toothpaste. Right now, that's $2.96. Finally, we have a 2018 Toyota Camry. The price of that is $23,495. So I want you to think about what factors affect price. Finding the prices that are just right for you to buy. Meaning, if you saw some of these items, would you think, well, if I really, really need it, would it actually be worth it to be able to buy it or to be able to afford it? Meaning, when would we make the decision not to buy it, and when would we make the decision to buy? Or from the perspective of the business, when do we make the choice to actually supply it versus when we don't want to supply that product? So when we look at market and prices, in a market economy, buyers and sellers have opposite goals. Buyers want to find the good deals at low prices. That's what our goal is as a buyer, constantly find the best price possible, buying things on clearance, buying things when they're going out, secondhand if needed, to get the prices down. Sellers hope to sell for high prices and for large profit, meaning that every goal of every business is to do the least amount of work to create the most amount of cash flow for your industry. Meaning, how much is it going to be willing, if you keep raising your product $1 at a time, when is it going to be a point where the customer is going to say, that's too much, all right? So what we do things called economic models, which we talked about in earlier chapters. So this is a simplified version of a complex behavior expressed as a graph, equation, or illustration. What you have is it's used to analyze behavior and predict outcomes for the purchase. Supply and demand curves are going to be both on the same graph now going forward. So what we have here is the idea called equilibrium price and quantity. So what happens is supply and demand curves are going to intersect at a specific point based off of the statistics or the data that you have analyzed. Prices at this point can be called the equilibrium price. It's the number supplied equals the number demanded. It's also called the market clearing price, where we get rid of all the items. Everybody has an item that wants an item can buy one, and everybody who wants to sell an item can sell it at the same exact time. Quantity at this point is called the equilibrium. So up here in this example, you have the supply curve, which is standardized. You have the demand curve that's there, the price and the quantity, and where they all intersect, that's called the equilibrium. That's the most perfect spot of the market where you want to get rid of your goods and you're able to get rid of your goods. Situations where quantity supplied is greater than the quantity demanded at a given price is called a surplus. This is where unsold units of a product, and it occurs when prices are too high. So think of a place where you go. My biggest idea of surpluses would be, think about like Halloween at Walmart. When you walk down the store, you see all these costumes, and the costumes are an expensive price. Soon after Halloween there, the prices gets clearanced out one day, maybe 2 days, and then the next day they're all gone. Sometimes they go away, sometimes they're just thrown away or donated. That is surplus, meaning that they're willing to get rid of some or lose some off of the money to make sure that they provide as much goods as they possibly can. That's where you see a surplus. A shortage occurs on the opposite end of the spectrum, and that's a situation in which the quantity demanded is greater than the quantity supplied at a given price. Sellers have no more products left to sell, and this occurs when prices are too low. So I think about, like, when you go to a place where things are on clearance. Think about, again, maybe after Halloween, or not after Halloween, maybe after Easter, when the candy's in the aisle, you're able to go and buy it because the prices are down low, and all of a sudden everything that you want is gone. Or if there's some kind of crazy sale going on at a store, I'm thinking Black Friday, when you go into into a Walmart or into a Target where they're selling a TV at a really super low price. Unfortunately, because they're selling it at such a low price, they don't have many to offer. So people run in like a crazy Looney Tune, get in there and kind of fight for televisions, and we'll talk about that coming up. So again, equilibrium is just the price where everything's just right. Economic models cannot show how long it will take for anything to reach equilibrium, and fluctuations in price will always push towards equilibrium. So again, when you look at above here would be the surplus, below would be the shortage in goods, but right in the center where supply and demand meet is the equilibrium price. So why do prices change? You see, market supply curve and market demand curves are influenced by a variety of factors. These factors can change at any time. It can be caused by a change in supply, a change in demand, or a change in both. The elasticity that we talked about earlier helps predict how these prices are likely to change. My biggest thing is I look at Pittsburgh Steelers tickets. When the Steelers are doing very, very well, there's going to be a higher demand. If something happened like Ben Roethlisberger retiring, and it was his last season, you would see an actual shift in the curve of demand, because what you're going to see is everybody be willing to pay a higher price based off the fact this might be the last time you get to see a future Hall of Famer in action. So changes in supply are illustrated in this aspect. Supply shift in curve, and we'll look at up here in the top part. This is in agriculture. So let's say, for instance, there was a hurricane. We'll say Hurricane Katrina was an example. What would happen is that we would be willing to supply a certain amount because of a shortage, meaning that the prices are going to rise, or the curve is going to shift, the line is going to shift to the left to illustrate the fact that we were willing to sell 1 unit of grapes at $10, but because there's a shortage because of a natural disaster or some kind of outside influence, now we're only willing to offer 1 unit at about $18. So you're going to see a total shift in the actual line. So instead of the curve actually moving, the whole curve itself is physically moving to the left. The demand curve works the same exact way, except for it's going to move to the right depending on the situation. So the demand curve is going to show expectations example, and that's going to be talking about energy. So if the demand is going to go up, meaning that we have more people who need to use energy than we had previously, what you're going to see is the people who are trying to produce it are going to try to charge a higher price at every offering. So when the demand moves to the right, you're going to see that, for instance, at 3 units, they were willing to provide it before at $80. Now they're only willing to provide it at $100, and it's just going to shift the entire equilibrium. So the old equilibrium is here, the new equilibrium is here, and the movement in between would result in a shortage based off of what was being given to begin with. So when you're looking at prices and competitive markets, price systems are more efficient when markets are competitive. That means that, you look at telephone services when you talk about cell phones like AT&T versus Verizon versus T-Mobile versus Sprint. Every month there's a new gimmick about, come join us and we'll give you this for free. Come join us and we'll do this. And eventually what you would say is it's going to make it so competitive that the prices should drop significantly. I look at cable also as a prime example of that, with all these digital streaming services like Hulu and Sling and YouTube now. Having those things now, it's going to eliminate the need for cable television, so therefore the cable prices should be competitive. They should actually go down. Prices need to be able to adjust in response to surpluses and shortages. On the same aspect too, when we look at the end of a season, thinking about going into summer, you get rid of all your winter items. Those prices are going to go down because if there's a surplus, you need to get rid of them. You need to be able to sell them and get them out of your stock or your inventory. Government policy tries to achieve the ideal model for a competitive market. So it means that the government is trying to influence in all ways to make sure that businesses are able to stay competitive. And competitive markets all allocate resources efficiently, meaning that they're going to look to make sure that every type of market is fairly open, so that everybody can join it, and the competition is allowed to reign supreme to make sure that everybody's getting the best deal or the best bang for their buck.